In the spring of 1901, a Greek sponge diver named Elias Stadiatis surfaced from a wreck off the island of Antikythera, ashen and shaking. He had seen, he told his crewmates, a heap of rotting corpses and horses on the seabed. They were not corpses. They were bronze and marble statues from a Roman ship that had sunk almost 2,000 years earlier. Among them lay a corroded lump of metal that no one would understand for another century. That lump is now the most studied object in the history of archaeology. It contains more than 30 interlocking bronze gears, cut to a precision that no European artisan would match for 1,400 years. It is the Antikythera Mechanism, and what it computed reaches further than anyone in 1901 could have imagined. To understand why, we have to go back to the wreck itself. The ship that carried the mechanism sank sometime around the middle of the 1st century BCE, almost certainly between 70 and 60 BCE. It was a cargo vessel of considerable size, around 40 meters long, en route from somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean to Italy. Its hold was packed with luxury goods bound for wealthy Roman buyers, bronze and marble statues, glassware, amphorae of wine, fine pottery. It was, in modern terms, a high-end shipment of Greek art for Roman collectors who hungered for the trappings of Hellenistic culture. The wreck lay undisturbed in roughly 50 meters of water until the sponge divers stumbled across it. The Greek government, recognizing the find at once, organized a salvage operation that lasted from late 1900 into the autumn of 1901. It was the first major underwater archaeological recovery in history. The divers brought up jewelry, glass, the famous Antikythera youth bronze, and, almost as an afterthought, the corroded metal lump that no one quite knew what to do with. It went into a drawer at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. There it sat, more or less ignored, until 1902, when an archaeologist named Valerios Stais noticed something extraordinary while examining the incrustations. A gear wheel, a precision-cut bronze gear, embedded in a lump that everyone had been treating as a corroded chunk of debris. Stais published a brief paper suggesting the object might be some kind of astronomical instrument. He was almost completely ignored. For the next half-century, the mechanism was a curiosity that nobody could explain. It violated everything historians thought they knew about ancient technology. The standard account, taught in every university, was that the Greeks had built impressive things out of stone and bronze, but their mechanical engineering was crude. They had no clocks. They had no precision gearing. The earliest known European geared device of comparable complexity was a 14th century clock, built for a French cathedral. The Antikythera mechanism was, by every conventional measure, 1,500 years out of place. The first person to take the object seriously was an English physicist and historian of science named Derek de Solla Price. Beginning in 1951, working with X-ray equipment at the National Museum in Athens, Price spent more than 2 decades building a model of what he believed the mechanism contained. In 1974, he published a long monograph titled Gears from the Greeks. It argued, on the basis of his X-ray imaging, that the mechanism was a sophisticated calendrical computer with at least 27 gears tracking lunar months, the Metonic cycle, and possibly planetary motion. His colleagues received the work with politeness and quiet skepticism. Price died in 1983, before the technology that would vindicate him existed. That technology arrived in 2005. A consortium called the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, a collaboration between Cardiff University, the University of Athens, and a British engineering firm called X-Tech Systems, wheeled an 8-ton micro-focus computed tomography scanner into the Athens Museum. The machine produced three-dimensional X-ray imagery of every fragment, at resolutions Price could only have dreamed of. What the scans revealed was not merely a calendar. It was a portable model of the cosmos. The mechanism, we now know, contained a minimum of 30 bronze gears. The surviving fragments suggest the original may have had as many as 37. On the front face, a pointer showed the position of the sun against the zodiac. Another tracked the moon's position. With a clever little device, a pin moving in a slot driven by an off-center gear, that reproduced the moon's varying speed across the sky. The Greeks knew the moon does not move uniformly. They did not know why, but they had measured it precisely enough to build it into bronze. On the back of the mechanism, two large spiral dials tracked two of the most subtle astronomical cycles known to antiquity. The upper dial showed the Metonic cycle, 19 solar years, in which 235 lunar months align almost exactly with the calendar. This was the cycle that allowed Greek city-states to coordinate religious festivals. The lower dial showed the Saros cycle, 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, the period after which solar and lunar eclipses repeat in nearly the same pattern. Within the Saros dial, small inscriptions predicted specific eclipses. We can read them. They name the day, the hour, even the color the eclipsed sun or moon was expected to take. A 2008 study published in Nature confirmed that these predictions match real eclipses observable from the eastern Mediterranean in the 2nd century BCE. The mechanism was not merely descriptive, it was predictive. You could turn the crank and watch the sky a decade into the future. A smaller subsidiary dial tracked the Olympiad, the 4-year cycle that organized athletic competitions across the Greek world, including the games at Olympia, Nemea, Delphi, and Isthmia. Inscriptions inside the device listed the games by name. This was an instrument as much social as scientific. The user did not need to be an astronomer. They needed only to know what season they were in, and the bronze would tell them everything else. How was such a thing possible in 150 BCE? This is the question the mechanism leaves behind. The traditional answer, that the ancient world simply lacked the engineering tradition for such precision, collapses on contact with the bronze in front of us. Someone, somewhere in the Hellenistic Mediterranean, knew how to cut triangular gear teeth, calculate gear ratios that approximated complex astronomical periods to within a fraction of a degree, and assemble the result into a casing the size of a shoebox. The most likely candidate workshop is Rhodes. Rhodes in the 2nd century BCE was a wealthy center of astronomical learning, home to the great astronomer Hipparchus, who first measured the precession of the equinoxes. The mechanism's eclipse predictions use a calendrical convention that matches Rhodian usage of the period. The ship that sank carrying it was probably moving high-end Hellenistic goods westward to Roman buyers, and a wealthy Roman with the right connections could have commissioned such a device as the ultimate luxury possession, a model of the heavens in bronze that fit on a desk. What it tells us is uncomfortable. The technology to build the Antikythera mechanism existed for at least 2 centuries before the wreck. Cicero, writing in the 1st century BCE, describes a similar device built by Archimedes, captured at the sack of Syracuse in 212 BCE, a bronze planetarium showing the motions of the sun, moon, and 5 known planets. Cicero saw it. He described it. We had assumed he was exaggerating. He was not. Then the technology vanished. The collapse of the Hellenistic world, the absorption of Greek learning into Rome, the slow contraction of late antiquity. Somewhere in that long unwinding, the workshops that produced bronze gears like these closed their doors. Their products corroded in shipwrecks and rubbish heaps. The knowledge persisted in scattered manuscripts, in Byzantine libraries, in Islamic scholarship. But the practical art of cutting bronze gears at this precision was not recovered in Europe until medieval clockmakers, working independently, rediscovered it the hard way. The Antikythera mechanism is not, as some popularizers have claimed, evidence of lost civilizations or alien intervention. It is something stranger and more troubling. It is evidence that an entirely human, entirely traceable line of Greek astronomers and engineers built precisely what their writings describe, and that we forgot, for 15 centuries, what they had achieved. The wreck of Antikythera did not preserve a miracle. It preserved a memory of how much can be lost. The mechanism sits today in a climate-controlled case in Athens, surrounded by visitors who mostly walk past it without stopping. It does not look like much. A few greenish lumps of corroded bronze, no larger than a hardback book. But inside that bronze is the proof that the past was always cleverer than we are willing to admit. And the only honest question it leaves us is the one we tend not to ask. What else have we forgotten?